You are a trader named Semenov, and you are sitting on your porch at a trading post called Vanavara in the middle of Siberia, eating breakfast. It is a few minutes past 7 in the morning. You are facing north, and the sky splits in two. That is not a figure of speech. Semenov later told a Soviet scientist in words that were written down exactly as he said them, that the whole northern sky caught fire, and the heat that reached him from something 65 kilometers away was strong enough that he felt his shirt was burning on his back. He was knocked off his porch. Something had just detonated over the Siberian wilderness with the force of roughly 15 million tons of TNT. And to this day, no one has ever found what caused it. The date is the 30th of June, 1908. The place is the basin of the Podkamenaya Tunguska River, one of the most remote, unpopulated stretches of forest on the planet, which, it turns out, is the only reason anyone survived to describe it. Whatever exploded that morning did so about 5 to 10 kilometers above the ground, with enough force to flatten an estimated 80 million trees across roughly 2,000 square kilometers of forest, an area larger than the city of London. The trees fell outward in a radiating pattern, all pointing away from a single point, like spokes on a wheel with no hub. There is no impact. There is no meteorite. There was no crater. There still isn't one. Barographs, instruments that record air pressure, picked up the shock wave as far away as London, England, more than 5,000 kilometers from Siberia. The pressure wave was strong enough that it circled the entire planet, and instruments recorded it passing by not once, but twice. For several nights afterward, observers across Europe and parts of Asia reported skies bright enough at midnight to read a newspaper by, without any artificial light. High-altitude dust kicked into the upper atmosphere, scattering sunlight through the night. People in cities that had never heard the word Tunguska were already living inside its aftermath. They simply didn't know it yet. And here's what's stranger, almost nobody outside Russia heard about it for years. The Russian Empire was already sliding toward revolution. Scientific expeditions to a swamp in the middle of Siberia were not a priority for a government about to collapse. It took 19 years, through a world war, a revolution, and a civil war, before anyone in a position to investigate finally did. In 1927, a Soviet mineralogist named Leonid Kulik led an expedition that finally stood at the epicenter. He had a theory. Somewhere in that flattened forest, there had to be a giant iron meteorite, and if he found it, the Soviet Union would have proof of one of the largest impacts in recorded history. He found bogs. He drained one, expecting a crater lined with metal fragments. At the bottom, an ordinary tree stump, undisturbed, exactly where a tree had always stood. No crater, no metal, no answer. What Kulik did find was the forest itself, and it told him more than any crater could have. Every fallen tree for tens of kilometers in every direction pointed away from the same central point. Except at that very center, where the trees were still standing, stripped bare of branches, burned upright like telephone poles. Whatever had exploded, it had exploded in the air, not on the ground. The energy had come down and out, not down and through. For decades, the leading explanation was straightforward. A stony asteroid or a fragment of a comet, somewhere between 50 and 60 meters across, entered the atmosphere fast enough and steep enough that the immense pressure of the air itself tore it apart and vaporized it several kilometers above the ground, releasing the energy of the entire object in one single airburst, with nothing solid left to leave a crater. But here's the question worth sitting with. If something that large can arrive, detonate with more force than 1,000 Hiroshimas, and leave behind nothing you could put in a museum, how would we know if it happened again, somewhere we were actually watching? We got an answer partially in 2013 over Chelyabinsk in the Ural Mountains. A much smaller object, perhaps 20 meters across, roughly a 30th the size of whatever caused Tunguska, entered the atmosphere and exploded in an airburst at a lower altitude. It injured over 1,600 people, mostly for flying glass shattered by the shockwave, and the whole event was captured on hundreds of dash cams within seconds, uploaded within hours, analyzed by scientists within days. The difference between 1908 and 2013 wasn't the physics. It was that in 2013 almost everyone owned a camera pointed at the windshield. Tunguska-sized objects, 50 to 60 meters across, are estimated to strike Earth on the order of once every few hundred to roughly 1,000 years, though the uncertainty in that estimate is itself part of the problem. We can only calculate the odds using a catalog of near-Earth objects that is still, even now, incomplete. Space agencies have spent the years since actively working to find and track these mid-sized objects specifically because they are large enough to devastate a region and small enough to have gone almost entirely undetected before impact, the way the Tunguska object did. And here's what's stranger still. The Tunguska object was never found in the sky before it arrived. Not one observatory, not one astronomer anywhere on Earth saw it coming. It simply appeared in the atmosphere, already falling. Leonid Kulik spent years of his life searching a swamp for iron that was never there, because the honest answer, something can hit you hard enough to flatten a forest and vanish completely, leaving only the shape of its absence, was harder to accept than a treasure hunt would have been. He wanted a crater because a crater is a thing you can hold. What he actually found was a pattern, a forest lying down in a direction, all pointing away from an empty patch of sky. Maybe that's the more honest shape of most catastrophic risk. Not a monument you can visit afterward, but a pattern only visible once you're standing in the middle of it, reading the wreckage outward. Somewhere above Siberia in June of 1908, something arrived that we still can't fully name, did damage that would level a modern city, and left before it could be photographed, measured, or explained. We keep building better ways to watch the sky. We have not yet built a way to be certain we've seen everything in it. If you like this video, consider subscribing.